Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Spotted Pod. So it's been about a week since I last recorded an episode of the Spotted Pod. So let's go ahead and jump into how the Spurs have done in their last four games from this past week. So the Spurs in their last four games, they went 2-2, so a little bit better than what Vegas thought they should be. They should have gone. In this past week, I know that they're coming off a 2-game losing streak as I'm recording this on a Sunday evening, but earlier in the week they had a pretty good week, getting some wins. So let's go back to a week ago on Monday. The Spurs are hosting the Sacramento Kings, who added DeMar DeRozan. I do want to note that the Kings were on the second out of a back-to-back, but they were still favored. They were favored by 2.5 in this game. This one was close in the first half, but then the Spurs completely took control in the second half, where they led by as many as 20 points in the second half, and they ended up winning this game by 20 points. So the Spurs got a win. Again, they were the underdogs. They ended up getting a win against the Kings on Monday. So that was the first win of the week. Then on Wednesday, the Spurs are hosting the Washington Wizards, their first Eastern Conference opponent of the season so far. And the Spurs were favored by 9.5, so this is supposed to be an easy Spurs win, although the Wizards did fight back a little bit. The Spurs took control early. They led by as many as 21 points, but then the Wizards kind of battled back, and the Spurs ended up winning the game by 9 points, still pretty comfortably. The big news of that day for that game was that Wemby went for a career high 50 points with 8 made threes in this game against the Wizards, and I'll talk more about Wemby a little bit later in the episode. But again, that was their second win of the week, which was against the Washington Wizards. So they took care of business there. San Antonio did, and got the win. And then comes the consecutive losses that I referred to earlier. The Spurs on Friday, they played their first NBA Cup group play game. They were hosting the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers had most of their players available. Spurs had pretty much everyone as well, except for Jeremy Sohan and Trey Jones. The Lakers were favored by 2.5, even though the game was in San Antonio. This was basically a very close game throughout all four quarters. I know that the Spurs went up by like 11 points or 12 points. The Lakers, same thing. But it really came down to crunch time, and it was about who was going to make the plays at the end there, and it was the Lakers who ended up outscoring the Spurs 14-11 in crunch time, the veteran Lakers team, and they end up winning this game by 5 points. The Lakers did. So that was the first loss for the Spurs this week. And then the second loss was more of an expected loss. So let me tell you about the circumstances for the Spurs. So Saturday, they're on the second out of a back-to-back. They have to travel to Dallas to play the Mavericks. And then we got news on Saturday afternoon that Victor Wembanyama would be out of the game because he suffered a right knee contusion. It's just a day-to-day injury. He went up to I think either he was driving or Anthony Davis was driving on a play in the fourth quarter in the Lakers game the night before, and Wemby and AD hit knees together, and Wemby actually went to the not the actual locker room, but he went to the tunnel area they showed on TV, and it looked like he was getting his knee worked on a little bit. He came back out and finished the game. And it seemed like he was going to be okay to play on Saturday, but then the Spurs obviously they wanted to be more cautious, and so he was held out of that game against Dallas with a right knee contusion. Again, it's day-to-day, that injury. It's nothing too serious. And then Devin Vassell, because he's only played in a few games here, part of his injury management is he hasn't been cleared yet to play in back-to-backs, so the Spurs held him out as well for more so injury management reasons. And so without Wemby and Vassell, the Spurs' top two leading scorers this season, Dallas was favored by 13 points, and that's basically what happened is the Mavericks took care of business. This was pretty close in the first half. The Spurs, held on with Dallas as much as they could, but then in the third quarter, Dallas completely blew the game open. They outscored the Spurs 38-18. They led by as many as 26 points, but the Spurs' reserves in the fourth quarter, they kind of battled back a little bit. They got the loss a little bit more respectable to 17 points, and so the Spurs did lose to Dallas by 17. And so, like I said, Vegas said the Spurs should have gone 1-3. They actually did a little bit better there. They went 2-2 this past week, and now for the season, through 14 games, they were just 2 games under 500 at 6-8. And again, before those two losses against Dallas and the Lakers, the Spurs were actually a 500 ball club as of Wednesday. So that was their quick little recap of this past week for the Spurs. Okay, so before I move on to the next topic of talking about 3 of the standout players from this past week, I want to talk about, I've been doing some deep dives on the Spurs, through the different markers of their season. So I know I did an episode last week on the Spurs through 10 games. And again, they've been through 14 games now. So I don't want to go too much into the overall stats of both ends of the floor. What I want to focus on for this episode, big topic here, idea, I guess you could say, is the math game. And so when I talk about the math game, I'm just talking about, when you look at overall threes, free throws, and twos, where are the Spurs? Are they winning that battle? Are they losing? How far away are they from their opponents this year? And so that's kind of what I want to focus on in this episode. So let's talk about the good things for the Spurs in the math game, and that's the threes and the free throws. So it's mainly the threes, really. This is where they have a big advantage right now. So as far as threes, some of their data as of Sunday afternoon, they're attempting 39 threes a game, which is ninth in the NBA right now. So that's ninth. They're ninth in attempts. So again, a top 10 3-point volume team, I guess you could say, in terms of attempts. They're making 13.8 per game, which is 11th. Again, right there, right above, right outside of the top 10. They're making 35% from three overall, their average. That's 16. So that's about league average. Not too bad. And again, that's actually pretty good considering how they first started. Those first few weeks of the season were pretty rough, where teams were leaving a lot of their players wide open, and they were just hounding Victor, 2 or 3 defenders going his way. And so now that games have started to come by, I guess that it's kind of regressed to the mean a little bit. And so they're looking like a better ball club shooting the 3 ball. 35% as a team right now, again, 16th in the league. As far as their wide open 3 accuracy, that number is at 38%. They're making their shots there, and that's 14th. So again, right inside league average, and that's something that they want to be in that top 10 range, because like I said, teams are going to leave a lot of their players open from 3 to send multiple double or triple teams toward Wemby at different times in games. And so that is important that the Spurs are making their wide open threes when those shots are presented to them. So basically, per game, the Spurs are outscoring their opponents by 2.7 points per game from the 3-point line. And when we talk about the whole season, they are now a plus 39 in total points in 3-point shots. So again, plus 39 points, you would say overall amongst 3-point shots. As far as how are they defending three, their opponent 3-point attempts their opponents are attempting 36 threes a night against them, which is also 9th, again, top 10 there. So defensively, not too bad in the top 10. Opponents are making 12.9 threes per game against them, 14th. So a little bit worrisome there. Again, still within league average, but not as good as the top 10. And then opponent 3-point percentage, opponents are making almost the exact same percentage as the Spurs. They're making 35.6% of their threes, which is 14th, again, within league average. So again, a lot of their numbers here, offensively and defensively, are in the top, in kind of like in the league average range between top 10 and league average. And so, like I said, we see that they're a plus 39 for the season right now in the 3-point battle. Again, they're outscoring their opponents from 3 by 39 total points for the season. And the reason why it's important that the Spurs do win the 3-point line is because they so far they've shown this season that they're more successful that way. When they win or tie the 3-point line, they are now 5-4. So again, what is that? 5 of their 6 wins are partly because of them winning the 3-point battle. Whereas when they lose the 3-point line, it's only been 5 times. They are 1-4 this season. So again, if they're not winning the 3-point battle, they have less of a better shot to win. Basically, it's tougher for them. So again, that's kind of where they're at in the 3-point battle. Again, we'll see if this holds for the whole season. It's very early. It's only 14 games. But again, I think that if Wemby's one of their key shot takers and he's taking a higher volume of threes this year, that might have a good chance of holding this year, of them being like in that top 10, top 15 3-point volume types of teams. Next area where the Spurs are winning is the free throw line. So they're not winning this one by a lot, but because they don't really get to the line a lot. But let me just dive into the numbers here. So free throw mix, they're making about 16.6 free throws per game, which is 20th. Again, they're not really a big team that gets to the free throw line a lot. That's not one of their parts of their offense. But they are winning the battle by 1.9 free throws per game over their opponent. And for the season, they're a plus 27 in total points from the free throw line over their opponent. And the reason for that is because defensively, they're really good. The Spurs are at not putting their opponent on the free throw line. Opponents are only making 14.7 free throws against them, which is makes the Spurs the 3rd best defense in limiting opponent makes from the free throw line. So again, it's just because on offense, the Spurs don't get to the line a lot, but just the fact that their defense is so good and not putting their opponent on the free throw line, they end up winning that battle as well. So again, for the total points, they're a plus 39 from 3. And they're a plus 27 from the free throw line. So now let's find out, why are they a minus 14 on the season? And now let's go to the 2-point battle. This is the place where the Spurs are losing this current season when we look at the math game. So in the restricted area, which is basically that dunk layup range, the area closest to the basket, about 3 to 4 feet with next to the basket, the Spurs are losing this battle barely by about 0.8 points per game, which is, again, basically a point per game. So they're almost even with their opponents there, you would say. The floater range, which is not a good shot. I mean, most teams don't want to take that shot unless you really have to. So they're losing that one, again, barely minus 1.8. So points per game, which isn't too bad. Again, you'd rather not take that shot if it's there for you. You'd rather take either right at the rim, you'd rather take or threes. You don't want to take really that floater range shot or the mid range shot if you don't have to. And an offense, but their opponents are barely winning that by about 2 points per game. So when we look at points in the paint, which combines the restricted area, which is the dunk layup range plus the floater range, the Spurs are only losing the points in the paint battle by 2.5 points per game. So basically around 3 points per game. And that's not too bad considering that a lot of their volume is coming from the outside, from the 3-point line. The fact that they're kind of holding, they're kind of staying right with their opponent in the points in the paint battle. And then when we look at the last part of the 2-point game, it's the mid range. So the Spurs per game, they're a minus 3.2 points per game. Their opponents are outscoring them by 3.2 points per game from the non-paint 2. And again, the mid range is kind of like a shot you don't really want your team taking a lot of times unless you have a really good shooter, someone like a Chris Paul, someone like a DeMar DeRozan, just those players who are known for their mid range game. But most other players, unless that it's a player that's like their main part of their game, you don't really want a lot of your whole team taking that shot because it's not an efficient shot. So they are losing that's probably the biggest area where they are losing the battle, but I think the Spurs would be okay with that, losing the mid-range game compared to some of those other areas. And so overall on twos, they are a minus 80 on the season in total points. So again, opponents are outscoring them by 80 points on twos. And so what that basically equates to is that this is a very much almost like a 500 ball club. Again, they're 6-8 right now, but they were 500 earlier this week. And we see that because basically for the season in total points, opponents are only outscoring them by 14 total points through 14 games. So again, that's not too bad. 14 total points. I mean, they can win a game and outscore someone by like 21 points from three and kind of make up a little bit of that. And then in terms of like the plus minus, they're just a -1. So they're barely losing these games. Again, they're just a -1 for the season. And so that's kind of just what I wanted to dive into early on is the fact that if they win the 3-point line, they have a good chance of being successful this year. And then as well as holding their opponents in free throws as well, even though they don't get to the free throw line a lot. And so that's just something to watch as the season progresses. Now that it's been 14 games, I do want to see what that math looks like, by like game 30, maybe game 50, see where those numbers are at. Okay, so for the final topic of this episode, I want to dive into 3 standout players from the week, players that really stood out this past week for the Spurs. So let's talk about Wemby. Of course, Wemby had a great week this past week. I'm going to kind of just talk a little bit about the stats, kind of what his stats were for the week. How they compare to his regular season average, and I'm just going to highlight a few numbers here. So points per game, obviously, we saw that he had a 50-point game, and that's going to help out his numbers here. So this past week, Wemby averaged in 3 games, he averaged 37 points per game. And that was well beyond his season average, which is about 22.7 points per game. We saw his shot attempts go up to 25 shot attempts this past week, compared to normally during the regular season, it's about 18 shot attempts per week, shot attempts per game. His field goal percentage was a lot more effective, more efficient. He made 57% of his shots from the floor this past week, whereas normally he makes 47%. And of course, the big reason for this was that he had his 3-ball going this past week. He took 13.7 3-pointers a game, which is his average is 8.6. So again, 5 more threes than he's already taking. And he made them really well this past week. He made 43.9% of his threes this past week. And for the season, he's barely over a point per shot now. That helped his average go up to 33.9%, because we saw in the last few weeks before he went on this hot streak from 3, he was shooting like in the 20%, 23% range. And so now that's kind of leveled up a little bit more now to his overall season average is at 33.9% from the 3-point line. So again, that was the main area where he really stood out this past week, was from shooting from the 3-point line. And then of course, inside, he's still an efficient shooter when he does get points in the paint. So I kind of want to talk about his week, how he had some of his standout performances against the Kings on Monday. He scored 34 points. He made 6 threes in this game, which that tied his career high at that time. He also had 10 paint points. So the fact that he's getting 3 balls to fall in now, that's helping him open up some lanes either on the roll and getting some alley-oops from his teammates, or kind of pump faking his defender and getting inside, or just getting a little bit more space to operate on the inside now that opponents are more worried about his 3. Of course, like I mentioned before, against the Washington Wizards, he had a 50-point night, which is a career high for him. And like I said, in this game, he made a career high 8 3-pointers. He actually did that in 3 quarters, getting the 8 3-pointers to go in. Plus, the fact that he was drilling threes over and over and over meant that he was able to get in the paint in this game as well. And so he scored 14 paint points against Washington. And so that's one thing that we noted in that 50-point game. And if you want to watch some details about that game, I made a video over on the spotofshot.com where I really dived into the tape of his 50-point career high night. And he just kind of, looked at different sets as the Spurs ran for him and just kind of the spot up shots that he's taking and things like that. And then against the Lakers, his 3-point percentage fell back down to earth a little bit in that game, but he still made 4 threes in this game. He scored 28 points, and then he also still got into the paint with 14 paint points as well. He got several alley-oops from different teammates in that game against the Lakers. And now when I talk about his 3-point, some of his numbers for the season, what I want to talk about is kind of the types of threes he's taken in and which ones are more efficient and which ones are maybe not as efficient so far for him. So one thing that defenses have definitely learned is that it's not good to leave him wide open. I know early on they were doing that because he was struggling, again, shooting around 20% from 3, but now that number is really ticked up. He's now making 44% of his wide open threes, Wemby, and we see that defense is definitely, not letting him have as much space anymore because just 43% of his threes are being attempted wide open. Earlier in the season, that was almost close to half of his threes were being attempted wide open when he was shooting 20%. So definitely defenses are now focusing on his three a little bit more, and they're going to be more aware of that shot and trying to at least get more space in between him and not giving him those 6+ feet of open room to take a three. There's also a big difference when we look at his catch and shoot threes, and this matches the eye test, his catch and shoot three compared to his pull-up three. Now, I know that last season it felt like he was a better pull-up three-point shooter than a catch and shoot three-point shooter, but this year he looks more so like a better catch and shoot three-point shooter. So right now, and the numbers don't lie either, he's making 36% of his catch and shoot threes this season so far, whereas with his pull-up three, he's only making 30% of his shots. And he did talk about how, he wasn't going to reduce his three-point volume. Obviously, like I said, he's taking a bunch of threes still. He's going to take better threes in terms of, I guess, you would say, more set shots, more spot-up catch and shoot attempts. And again, when he's given that space and able to get into his form with 2 feet already planted on the ground, we do see that more of his makes are coming on those types of threes. A lot of the times when he's being forced to take some of those pull-up threes, those are the ones that usually go out. And a big example of that was that recent game against the Lakers where he had a smaller player guarding him from the 3-point line. I think it was D'Angelo Russell or someone like that. And he basically took a pull-up three, and I think he aired it or he missed it. I don't know if he was looking for a foul there or what happened, but he basically missed it, and that was in crunch time. So again, early on, the numbers are saying that his 3-point shot is definitely better when he takes the catch and shoot threes. And then I think that Wemby is definitely going to be a nominee for the Western Conference Player of the Week on Monday when that award gets announced. Again, I don't know if he'll win the Western Conference Player of the Week because there was some very good other players had good weeks this past week out west, such as De'Aaron Fox had a 49-point game the other night. I think he had a 60-point game. Who else? There's a few other players. SGA from the Thunder. The Thunder went undefeated this week at 3-0, so he's been having a good week. So again, Anthony Davis had a good week. He was 3-0 as of Sunday afternoon when I looked up the numbers for him. So again, Wemby's in a tough competition to get the Player of the Week out west, but again, he's going to definitely be a nominee, I think, for the Western Conference Player of the Week, and that's pretty good for him because again, he hadn't been a nominee yet out west, and so this is showing that he's starting to pick up his performances. All right, the next player for the Spurs who had a good week was Devin Vassell. The Spurs is the second league scorer already, just by averages. So this past week he averaged 14.7 points. Actually, I'm not going to go into the week. I'm just going to talk about his season because he's only played in 4 games total. So he's basically scoring 16 points off the bench right now for the Spurs on a minutes restriction. Keep in mind. So he's taking about 12 shots a game, making 45% of them. He's a high volume shooter for the team that they've needed. He's taking about 6.8 threes per game in his time and making 37% of them. Again, with more playing time, I think we're going to see his percentage start to go up even more, even though 37% is already a pretty good number there. Getting 2.8 free throws attempts per game. So he's made all of his free throws so far to start the year. And then he's getting, of course, you see his creativity, especially in crunch time at different times from Vassell, where he's averaging 3.5 assists to 1.8 turnovers. He had a big alley-oop recently in one of the close games for the Spurs where he found Wemby there right under the rim. So again, Vassell's been helping out his teammates there. And like I mentioned, he's been on a minutes restriction because he's barely coming back from that foot injury. So he's basically averaging about 23 minutes a night. And one thing the Spurs are doing is they're having him come off the bench still. We don't know when he's going to go back to the starting lineup. I guess not until that minutes restriction gets lifted. But one thing we see is that they're monitoring his minutes to where they're allowing him to play in crunch time, because every game that they've gone to crunch time since Vassell's been back in the lineup, he's been out there on the floor with the team. So again, they're trying to keep him, his minutes available so that he can play in crunch time, and we see him out there. Just how he did this past week, he scored 13 points against the Kings. 9 of his points came from 3. Against the Wizards, he scored 17 points for the Spurs. 6 points came from mid-range. And then against the Lakers, 15 points he had off the bench, and 9 points came from 3 as well in that game. And just so a picture of his early shot diet, and again, I do want to say that it is just 4 games that he's played in, so it's a very small sample size. 55% of his shots are coming from 3, 29% from mid-range, and then 16% of his shots are coming in the paint. So again, that's Devin Vassell, who had a good week. And like I said, once his minutes restriction gets eventually gets removed, I think he's going to really start to go, start to see some of his season averages go even higher in different areas of the game. All right, the last player who had a pretty good week for the Spurs was the rookie Stephon Castle. So Steph's, every week he's just been pretty impressive here. Let's talk about his week though, how he did in some different areas that really stood out to me. Points per game, he's definitely scoring in double digits here most lately, especially since he became a starter with Jeremy Sohan on the injured list. He went from this past week, he averaged 13.5 points per game, which normally his season averages at 9.9. So that's continuing to tick up every game, basically. His shot attempts have gone up a little bit, where for the season he averages 8.8 shots. Right now he's at 10 shot attempts. So he's been a little bit more confident in terms of being more aggressive and trying to either attack or take the shots from three. His field goal percentage has gone up. So normally for the season he shoots 40% from the floor. Right now he's at 45%. And then his 3-point shots has also stayed consistent, where he's still taking those threes each game. For the season, he's taken about 3.4 three-point attempts, but right now, this past week, he took about 4 shots per game from three, and he's shooting better this past week. Actually, like the last 5 games for him. Right now, in the last week, he made 50% of his threes, and for the season, that number is now up to 30%. Now, of course, 30% does not sound great, but there was a time when Castle was shooting like 19% the first few games out of the season, so that number is slowly starting to tick up. And so again, that's not a shot that he was known for coming in, but he has pretty good form there on that shot, and he's not shy about it. He'll take about 2 to 4 per game, and like I said, he's been on a hot streak from three lately, shooting pretty well in his last 5 games. He's also been more aggressive, and we see that he's definitely one of those players who can get to the free throw line, like Keldon Johnson, like Wemby, for the Spurs, where Castle's gone from 2.7 free throw attempts for the season to 3.5 this past week. He was getting 3.5 free throw attempts this past week. His accuracy from three has gone up. I mean, not three. From free throw range has gone up a little bit. And then his assists, his creation for his teammates. He's gone from 3.1 assists for the season to 4.8 this past week. And then turnovers just barely ticked up 1.3 to 2 turnovers. And I just want to say something about Castle is that you see that he has a lot of command in the pick and roll, finding Wemby, under the basket or on lobs, finding cutters. And then also he had a good connection with Zach Collins in that loss to the Mavs, found Zach under the rim multiple times. And I think that's just one thing you see is he's very comfortable running the pick and roll at the NBA level. And even his pick and roll numbers from Synergy do paint that picture, where he's averaging the Spurs are averaging 0.95 points per possession on the pick and roll when Castle is the lead ball handler, and I think it was like 41 possessions. So again, 0.95 isn't a, 1 over 1, but it's almost there. You're almost right there. And again, that's really good for him for just being in 14 NBA games so far this year, that he's already almost at he's showing to be one of the better pick and roll ball handlers on this team, because he's basically his numbers second highest to only Chris Paul, of course, and Chris Paul's known as a good pick and roll ball handler. So again, that's pretty good data to see from Castle, and it matches the eye test, where you see that he's very comfortable in the NBA pick and roll, and he has a lot of command out there. Looking at his week scoring the ball. So against the Kings, he scored 10 points. He made 2 threes in this game. Against the Wizards, he scored 10 points. And then he had a big scoring night against the Lakers, where he came out with 22 points. He made 3 threes, and he was very aggressive attacking the Lakers inside their defense. And he ended up getting to the free throw line the most for the Spurs and making 5 free throws to lead the team. And there was a play, of course, in the fourth quarter where he basically went from the right side. He went up against like 3 different Lakers defenders and did like a lefty layup and got it to go in. So again, he's just showing that, he's very polished, attacking the rim for a first year rookie player who's only played in 14 games. And then against the Mavs in the loss, he ended up with 12 points. And then just what we see from his early shot diet is that 47% of his shots do come from the paint, 35% from 3, and then 15% of his shots from mid-range. And again, his accuracy numbers aren't quite efficient just yet, but again, you're seeing the small upticks every game for him. And of course, he's just a rookie. Like, this is like his blank slate of a season to try to figure out what is he going to be as an NBA player. And so that's why, it's good for the Spurs are giving him minutes, multiple times in different games, and especially with Sohan out, he's getting to be in that starting lineup. And then one thing I noted too was that when we look at the Spurs' crunch time numbers, Castle actually is tied with Wemby in makes and just field goal makes in crunch time. And he's also leading the team in free throw makes. So again, this kid's a rookie, and he's already, out there in crunch time. He's played in 80% of their crunch time games, and he's one of their go-to players that they're looking for offense. And so that, again, that's just something to mention there regarding the rookie Stephon Castle. All right, now before I close out this episode, I want to preview the Spurs' upcoming next 6 games, and the reason why I do want to preview multiple games here, basically 2 weeks worth of games, is because this is probably gonna be my last Spot Up Pod episode for until after the Thanksgiving holiday. So I have some family coming in, and it's gonna be really hard for me to probably be available to record an episode. So I'm gonna go basically take care of the next 2 weeks in terms of previews here in this episode. But if there's a chance that I can get back on the pod before that, I will. But if not, you probably won't hear me again till Monday, December 2nd. So again, let me go through these games real quick here. So on Tuesday, the Spurs, this coming week, they're going to play the Oklahoma City Thunder in San Antonio. I believe that's an NBA Cup game. Then on Thursday, they have the Utah Jazz again in San Antonio. This will be the 3rd time the Spurs have played the Jazz. They are 1-1 against the Jazz so far. On Saturday, they meet the Golden State Warriors here in San Antonio. Then on Tuesday, the following week, November 26th, Thanksgiving week, the Spurs go on the road to Utah to play the Jazz. Then on November 27th, a Wednesday, it's a second night of a back-to-back. They're going to play the Lakers. I believe that's in San Antonio. And then on Sunday of Thanksgiving week, after Thanksgiving's over, they're going to go on the road to Sacramento to play the Kings. That's on December 1st. So again, that looks like a pretty tough schedule. Again, you got OKC, Golden State, the Lakers, the Kings. Those are 4 really good teams in the Western Conference. And so the only 2 games are against the Utah Jazz, but even Utah was competitive against the Spurs by beating them in San Antonio already this season. So for my prediction, I guess I'm going to go at 2-4 for the Spurs in these next 6 games. Again, we'll see if which games they can pull out, but I'm thinking that they can win the 2 Utah games. We'll see, because again, that Lakers game is a tough one on the second night of back-to-back, and then so we'll see what happens there. All right. So again, if I don't record a podcast before Thanksgiving, have a great Thanksgiving holiday. I will talk to you all with a new episode on Monday, December 2nd.